r/ask Reddit by online comps. Teachers of Reddit, what are some positive trends you have noticed in today's youth? As a general rule, they are more understanding and forgiving if somebody is different. Don't get me wrong, some of them are still dicks to those kids, but it is a shrinking minority. Edit. Wow, most upvoted comment of the day. Reading the comments, it seems many of you agree. That can only be a good thing. Agreed. Been teaching high school for 26 years. Students are much more accepting of differences. Much less overt homophobia. And the ones who would have been the least tolerant now keep their mouths shut, for the most part. Bullying still occurs though. Also, I find students more willing to challenge perceived harassment. This is what I tell people. If you go around spewing hate for different groups of people, no one will talk to you. You'll be that racist outcast that no one likes, except the other racist outcasts. You can't say something racist in front of people, because no one will laugh, and they will just look at you crazy. I try to convince people that they will just look foolish and lose any respect that others has for them. It is clear the general population is not accepting of hate anymore. If you are hateful, you will alienate yourself. My GF is a teacher, and she is amazed at how uncool drinking and driving is. Kids are like that stupid you will kill someone. They literally make fun of kids who do it. In my day everyone drove drunk. Very positive change. Edit. For the 20,000 plus people saying my username doesn't check out, I'm going to have to ask you to do something risky and Google hard gay man. If you don't want to do it, you're missing out. Yahoo! People who have hard gay in their lives are better for it. I was in college right when Uber was introduced. My first year, everyone drunk and drove. I didn't drink till I was 20, so I was DD a lot luckily. But it was just something a bunch of people did. By the time I graduated, people were seen as reckless and stupid for driving after drinking. Just take an Uber. Don't be a lick is a common phrase. It's really awesome. High school teacher here. The most admirable quality of a rising generation is their ability to take anything, and I mean anything, and turn it into a meme. And quickly, my god. Meme culture is basically just clothing/fashion on hyperdrive. It takes an entire season for the latest backquote and clothing to change. That time frame turns into weeks for memes. Sometimes days. I'm a teacher at a high school in Missouri. All of the stereotypes you hear/see in rural high schools are still prevalent. However, almost every group works harder academically. It is no longer cool to get F's and fail. Even country boys who will never leave the farm or go to college care about getting passing grades. 600 plus students in our HSBTW. It doesn't really surprise me about the country boys. Contrary to popular belief, farmers in the US actually have to be knowledgeable in several fields. Now, the older generation knows this and encourages their kids in school when their own parents didn't see the use of it. Kindness. My college students are kind and supportive to one another most of the time. Why be mean to each other when we're all getting ducked? I asked my wife, primary teacher, and she says empathy and adaptability are the two traits she has seen dramatically improve over her last 15 years. Kids seem to be better at putting themselves in another's position and understanding their situation. Also, they seem to be much more flexible with changes, whether in the classroom or the outside world. Funnily enough, I feel like the internet and global culture contribute to this a lot. Granted, I think the internet can be a really bad influence on young kids, but it really removes the bubble a lot of us has when we were younger. Having a global perspective and understanding how different people are everywhere around the world also helps put our small interpersonal differences in perspective as well. I feel like that does a lot for the kids of today, though they probably don't even realize it. Spouse to a high school teacher, she had to say, they were born into the internet and social media. It is not something they had to learn. Also, as a result of which, they are also more self-reliant with research. And most importantly, contrary to the largest complaints, today's kids are extremely hardworking and are less judgy of nerds, less judgmental in general. My little sister, who is just 25, is a high school teacher, and she says that being the smart, well-rounded kid is a cool thing. Being the asshole slacker isn't cool at all. The majority of my students are in the 18 to 22 age range. I'm 37, for reference. Students are far kinder than they ever were when I was a student. They go out of their way to help each other, and they are much less judgmental than my cohort was. For the most part, they are really polite and respectful. I know a lot of professors deal with problems from cell phones, but I find that if I tell them to use their phones respectfully and only for class purposes, they do. The only real problem I seem to have with this cohort is the constant headphone wearing, but I think that's a battle I'm just going to lose. Edit. Wow, my inbox. Thank you all for responding about how headphones help you in class. For what it's worth, I allow students who need them to use them, provided they are registered with disability services. I also allow them in lab classes. It just gets really frustrating in lectures for me to have to repeat instructions because students couldn't hear over their headphones, or when someone is too busy rocking out to listen to the lecture. I'm going to have to think of some strategies to help those students who need them while still making sure they're not being disruptive or missing important stuff. Edit the second. I'm truly, deeply sorry for my spelling error. I'm leaving my very small mistake up as a badge of shame. They are generally independent and self-reflective. When I first started teaching, I thought I had simply lucked out getting students who were consistently bright, engaged and curious, but having now taught at 3 different universities on 2 different continents, it seems to be a general trend across universities. They are also, as noted elsewhere, generally kind and empathetic, and both my male and female students are usually pretty emotionally mature. This whole emotional maturity having improved in my generation compared to my parents' thing is something I started thinking about when my mum described some of the stuff around divorcing my dad. She was older than I'm now when it all went down, in her 30s, and did a whole host of petty and childish shit. I don't think she'd do it now, but it seemed like everyone in that situation was equally emotionally immature. Maybe my family and their friends specifically are just trashier than I and my friends are now, but I can't help but notice that my parents became emotionally matured at the same rate I did. I wonder if the internet has encouraged greater perspective taking and has made for a more empathetic and emotionally mature society. These days if someone is being petty, they at last know it most of the time. The 8-year-olds I teach really make a huge deal about plastic. We watched the Blue Planet 2 episode with them, and since then they have been so mindful and really want to protect the oceans. As an environmental engineer, I can tell you that awareness is the single most powerful tool to give us a chance of a future. Keep doing your crucial job, mate. Kids are openly kind and loving regarding their parents. I had a tough football player day in class once. I love my mom. She's my best friend. I see the old ugh my parents suuuak mentality falling by the wayside recently. I wonder if this has more to do with kids who grew up with shitty parents and don't want to repeat their mistakes. My parents were in no way shitty, but I really wish they handled a few situations differently. I always make mental notes of what to do or not do if I ever had a kid. Girls ask boys out more often. Boys are starting to expect girls to be more frank and straightforward with what they want more often. Other than that, just like my colleagues. Generally kinder, more generous, understanding of differences, mature. On the other hand, I find them generally more sad, maybe more cynical, and overall quite happily pessimistic toward the future. A kind of a we are so fucked vibe I feel sometimes. Edit. I got to say that I teach in France, it has its importance. I worried about my son, who has mild autism, for the first 10 years of his life. I kept telling him that middle school would be hard, kids would tease him, etc., and that high school would be even harder in the same respect 15 years ago. I would have been right. Fast forward to now, and I'm constantly amazed and grateful for how well he is treated. Even the jock kids and big snotty idiot kids who would make perfect bullies are inclusive, kind, and even sometimes protective of my son. I've told all of them how appreciative I am, and even got a few of them Christmas presents this year. Love those kids. Edit. A few people are doing the math. My son is 11 and I'm 30. He's not in high school yet, but he will be there with the same kids he is in middle school with, so I feel confident about it. Edit 2. My first gold. I'm not even a teacher. A realization that any sort of specialization is a good thing, and that a 4-year college isn't necessary for everyone. Lots of my students want to go to tech/trade school or apprenticeships. They're learning from my debt-laden generation. Edit to at Jesus people, I don't welcome my kids to class every day and tell them that college is for chumps and to become an electrician. If a student tells me their goals and they can be well achieved through trade or vocational school, I encourage that. If a student tells me their goals and they need to go to university, then I encourage that. They really get each other. As much as they diss on each other, joke around, and yes, get to the point of blows, they can usually put issues aside. Sometimes to a fault, but overall they are pretty understanding of each other. Comment from a senior in high school. This is the most accurate answer here. We are complete licks to our friends and nice to strangers. Not a teacher, but I've noticed that a lot of children seem to be questioning authority rather than flat out rebelling. I wonder if that's actually any different, or if we as the adult generation are now more accepting of questions, so we treat kids with more respect and actually answer questions. So instead of calling it rebellion, we call it curiosity. Edit. Wow, thanks for the gold. Never gotten that before. The high school students I work with today seem significantly more emotionally intelligent than those of my generation, especially the young men. They are aware of their own feelings and are better at separating their feelings from fact. That is, they are more likely to say I'm feeling X, Y, Z, negative emotion right now than ugh, this teacher just hates me, what a bitch. They're also better at seeing and accommodating emotions in other people. There's more awareness of and sympathy for mental health issues. Here's an illustration. The other day, some of the students I coach were conversing, and one young man asked how frequently they had a good cry. They all answered. And he said, I think I'm overdue for a good cry, and his peers started suggesting good movies to induce tears. It was an utterly shocking scene for me. Great, but nothing I would ever have expected. Kids can be stunningly introspective and empathetic when you ask them to talk about their interpersonal issues. There's a real effort to perspective taking that goes beyond what I encountered at that age. Also, the students I work with have some selection bias, to be fair, but the ones I encounter as a whole care a lot about current events. It's like it's actually cool to know and care what's going on, and it's uncool not to. This is very different from how I grew up. I think a lot of them would agree with the statement being smart is cool and learning new things is fun, which seems simplistic, but isn't true to everyone. I think it's related to the pressure to get into college. This pressure to be more well-rounded in your interests is a double-edged sword. Kids get social capital from being exposed to different ideas and cultivating interests, but it's also a difficult race to model yourself into some ideal. Edit. I should clarify that I'm a coach, not a teacher, so my sample size is more homogeneous. I'm also in a unique position where I regularly interact with urban public school kids, mostly low-income students of color, largely white, wealthy suburban public school kids, and first-year college students. These observations apply across that spectrum. As someone who is a youth of today, I've literally never seen bullying where I live. People are kind of dicks sometimes, but not bullies. I can agree. As I got older, I noticed that kids don't bully as much. They just leave the people they don't like alone. When I was in high, I didn't notice any bullying. All my issues had to do with me willingly being around the wrong people. Edit. I'm not saying bullying doesn't exist anymore. I'm just saying that it's decreasing. I was bullied until high school, so I know what the different forms of bullying can be like. I was excluded and made fun of. When I got to high school, people just left people like me and others alone. Students are not afraid to just be nice to each other. I teach elementary art, and it is so nice when a kid who is pretty unskilled in art show another kid their work, and instead of getting laughed at, like when I was in school, kids are just so sweet and will say things like, wow, I really love that. I hear kids telling other kids, I think your work is beautiful, or I really like your ideas. And I just think of when I was in art, kids made fun of my work. In general, I really don't see kids being bullies as much as they were when I was a kid. I went to school in a really nice district too with few problems, but I was bullied. Kids here have a much worse home life than kids at my old school, and while they could choose to take it out on others, they don't. Kids help each other too. They know if a student is special and will try to help that student out. They'll offer to walk them to the bathroom, or help them with their drawing, or very politely tell them to be careful with things. Please like and comment on the video, hit the subscribe button, and don't forget to click the bell icon. Doing so will help stop global warming and help these fluffy icebergs. Thanks for watching and be positive.